In today's video, I'm sharing some Dollar Tree pumpkin DIYs that are so easy, budget-friendly, and perfect for adding cozy fall decorations to your home. If you love affordable crafts and simple ways to make your space feel festive for the season, you're gonna love these ideas. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss more fall DIY inspiration. These styrofoam pumpkins are pretty plain on their own, but with just a few coats of paint, it really elevates them and changes the whole look of them. I'm going to be using 3 of them, and I'm also going to be using a piece of box art. I have this hexagon shape that I got at Michael's, but you can also use one of the frames that you can find at the Dollar Tree. Before I got started on painting my pumpkins, I did want to remove the stem at the top. I didn't really like how it looked and it just wasn't necessary. It was pretty easy to take that off. It's basically just attached with a toothpick, so I just had to give it a little twist and it came right out. Don't worry if the top looks a little rough, it's okay. It's going to get covered up later on. Now you can choose to paint your pumpkins whatever colors you like or whatever colors would fit in with your decor. I decided to give each of mine a different color, so I picked out 3 of my favorite colors to use. I have a dark blue, a dark green, and a yellow. And because this is styrofoam, once you add the chalk paint to it, it does give it a different look. Some of the texture from the styrofoam comes through, and I really like that texture that it shows through. Now, because these pumpkins are a bright orange, I did have to give each one 2 coats of paint. I am going to be stacking these pumpkins on top of my base, and for my base I'm using this hexagon that I got from Michael's. Now, depending on what you're using, you can choose to either paint or stain yours. This was already a natural wood, which I did like the color, but I wanted it to be a little darker for fall. So I'm just using some of the antique wax and I'm applying it with a baby wipe. After my paint and stain had a chance to dry, I could start assembling everything together. Before I started gluing things together, I did want to add just a little embellishment to my base piece, so I had this beige and white gingham ribbon, and I'm just hot gluing that along the outside of my hexagon. Out of my 3 pumpkins, I wanted my yellow pumpkin to be on top, so that's the only one that needs a stem. I had some little twigs in my stash, so I glued one of those to the top to act as a stem. Then I started decorating around the stem. I'm using some silk fall leaves and also some flowers, and then I did go ahead and tie a bow out of the same beige and white ribbon that I used on the base, and I added that to the top as well. The last thing I needed to do was create my pumpkin stack, so I'm starting with the dark blue pumpkin. I added some hot glue to the bottom, and then I added it to my base. Now I am going to be stacking these pumpkins on top of each other, and they don't need stems, but I did want some leaves poking out in between the other pumpkins, so I'm using those same silk fall leaves, and I just added a few on the top before I added in my next pumpkin. Now these pumpkins are styrofoam and they're hollow, so they're very light, so I wasn't worried that the hot glue wouldn't be strong enough. If they were any heavier, I probably would have ran a dowel through the center to make sure that they were nice and secure. But like I said, they're really light and they are hollow on the inside, so I knew the hot glue would be strong enough to hold all 3 of them together. I thought it would be fun to create a piece of 3D wall art, so from the Crafter Square section of the Dollar Tree, I grabbed one of these 10 by 10 stretch canvases. I'm also going to be using one of those styrofoam pumpkins and a piece of scrapbook paper that I already had. Now, if you wanted to, you could grab 2 of those canvases because you could make 2 pieces of art out of 1 pumpkin. You can see there's a seam running down through the center of this pumpkin, so I just used my utility knife and I used that seam as my guide to cut this pumpkin in half. While I had my utility knife out, I removed the canvas from the frame. This is always pretty easy. You just run the blade along the edge and then you can pull the material off. Now, depending on what I'm making, sometimes I pull the staples out, sometimes I don't. I knew this time that I would be covering up those staples, so I didn't bother to remove them, but they're usually pretty easy to get out with just a pair of pliers. Since I picked out a teal patterned paper for my background, I wanted to paint my pumpkin white. So I'm using some chalk paint here, and I did have to give it 2 coats. I also did a light dry brushing over my frame with the same white chalk paint. After I got the second coat of white chalk paint on my pumpkin, while the white paint was still wet, I went in with a thinner paintbrush and some light gray paint, and I just wanted to define the lines in the pumpkin a bit more. As I was painting the gray on, it did blend in with the white a bit, which is what I wanted. I wanted those lines to be very subtle. In some places where the lines were a little too dark for my taste, I just took my white paintbrush and went back over them very lightly. So this is a pretty forgiving project. As you're adding in the lines, if you think they look a little too dark, you can always fix it with some of the original color paint you used, or you can make them darker just by adding in a little bit more gray. I got to work cutting down the background while all of my paint was drying. Since this was a 10 by 10 frame, I cut my scrapbook paper and a piece of poster board down to 9 3/4 inches by 9 3/4 inches, and I wanted to just glue those together. The reason I'm using the poster board is because I felt like the scrapbook paper just wasn't quite sturdy enough to hold the pumpkin, so I'm using the poster board to make it a bit thicker. Now, I've gotten questions about this tape runner that I use. It's pretty big. It's the Advanced Tape Runner from Scotch, and I don't think they make it anymore because I tried to find it on Amazon so that I could link it for you, but I couldn't find it. And the one that I have, I bought at Michael's, and the last time I was at the store, I looked for it there and I couldn't find it, so I'm thinking it's probably discontinued. I do still have a few refills left for mine, so I guess when I'm out of refills, I'll have to find something else to use. After I had my background cut down to the size I needed, then I just used some hot glue to attach it to the back side of my frame. I added some hot glue to the back side of my pumpkin, and then I stuck it on my frame. I didn't put it quite in the center. I did it just below center because I knew I was going to be adding a stem. I hot glued on my wooden stem, and then I started decorating my pumpkin. I used a variety of different fall leaves, and then I added in a few fall flowers. This would be really fun to customize to your taste. If you didn't feel like adding in leaves and flowers, you could make a really big bow and just add that to the top of your pumpkin. I went over to the glassware aisle of the Dollar Tree and I picked out a small glass that I knew I would be able to fit down inside one of these styrofoam pumpkins. I thought this would be a fun way to hold some utensils for the next time you have a fall holiday party or gathering. I also grabbed a pack of the everyday cutlery set from the Dollar Tree and a pack of their fall napkins. And rather than painting this pumpkin, I'm just going to decorate it with some silk fall leaves. I started by taking my utility knife and cutting a circle around the top of the pumpkin. There is a little bit of a line here where the pumpkin starts to flatten out, so I used that as my guide, and I was able to take my utility knife and kind of poke it up and down until I had that circle cut out. Now, when I measured my glass next to the circle, it wasn't quite big enough, so then I did have to go through and cut just a little bit more off to make sure that my glass could fit down inside of the circle. And this is where it comes in handy that this pumpkin was already hollow inside. I didn't have to worry about hollowing any of that foam out. I could just slip my glass down inside. And don't worry if your edges are a little bit rough. We're going to cover those up later. I'm using these fall silk leaves not only to make this pumpkin look a little more festive, but it's also going to help cover up the rough cuts from that styrofoam. I add a little hot glue to the inside of where I had cut. I laid one of my silk leaves into it, and then I folded it over the edge and added just another small dot of hot glue so that the tip of the leaf could be glued to the pumpkin. Then I just started overlapping all of my leaves on top of each other. So you can see the second leaf I glued about halfway over the first leaf, and I did the same thing where I added hot glue to the inside and then folded my leaf over, adding just a small dot of hot glue so that leaf could lay flat against my pumpkin. And I repeated that until I had the entire top of the pumpkin covered with leaves. After my first round of leaves were all in place, then I wanted to go back through and do a second layer, but this time rather than folding them over the pumpkin, I'm just gluing them right to the top, and I'm only adding hot glue to the base of the leaves so that the point of the leaf will stick out and give it a little more dimension. Since I do plan on putting utensils in this glass, I didn't want to hot glue anything to it so that I could remove it and wash it when I needed to. But I did want to add a little decoration, so I'm just taking some jute cord. I wrapped it around the glass a few times, and then I just tied it into a bow, and I think it gave it that nice little touch that it needed. You could just take that plastic cutlery and stick it right into the glass, and I think that would look cute like that, but I decided to make some silverware bundles. So I'm taking these fall napkins and I laid a fork, a knife, and a spoon diagonally across the napkin. I folded the one corner up and over, and then I just rolled it into a little bundle and tied it with some jute cord. As I was creating all of these little utensil bundles, I realized that this would also make a really cute candy dish. And one of my favorite fall candies are these Werther's Original Caramels in the apple flavor. So let me know, would you use this for utensils or would you use it for a candy dish? If you don't have a lot of time to craft, I want to show you how you can make a quick and easy centerpiece. From the Dollar Tree, I grabbed one of their chargers. I really like this blue one with the scalloped edges. I also went over to the seasonal decor and grabbed a pack of their fairy lights. They have a couple different shapes, but I really like the red leaves. And then in the candle section, I grabbed one of their LED pillar candles. I'm also going to be using some odds and ends of flowers and leaves that I already had, and of course a styrofoam pumpkin and a fabric that I really like. You can see on the top of the pumpkin there is a line there, so I'm using my utility knife to cut right along that line to cut a circle out of the top of the pumpkin. On the bottom of the pumpkin, I cut another circle. There's not a line to follow here, but I didn't need it to be that big. I just wanted it big enough that I could slip the battery pack from those red leaf lights up into the pumpkin. I also got really lucky with the top hole of the pumpkin because that candle fit perfectly inside of it. I really like the look of frayed edges on fabric, so rather than cutting my fabric into strips, I'm just going to tear it. So I measured over about 1 to 1.25 inches, and I cut a small slit with my scissors, and then I just ripped it the rest of the way so that it had that nice frayed edge. If that's not really the look you're going for, you could just cut your fabric into strips so you have a little bit of a cleaner edge. My strips were just a bit too long, so I did end up cutting them in half, and they fit a lot better on my pumpkin that way. Then I got to work adding all of my strips to my pumpkin. I added some hot glue to the inside of that top circle that I had cut out, and then I pulled the fabric tight down over the side of the pumpkin, added a little more hot glue on the inside of the bottom circle, and held that fabric in place. As I worked my way around the pumpkin, I just made sure that the fabric was pulled really tight, and every time I added a new strip, I made sure that it overlapped the first strip just a bit so that you couldn't see any of that styrofoam through the fabric. I'm not going to be hot gluing anything to the charger or to my pumpkin because I want to be able to turn on and off the little red leaf lights and the pillar candle. Now, if you were to get little lights or candles from somewhere else, you could probably find some that are on a timer so you don't have to keep taking it apart every time you want to turn it on and off. But unfortunately, at the $1.25 tree, you only have the option to turn it on or off. But it is nice to have that access through the pumpkin. I don't have to take the whole thing apart every time I want to turn it on and off. I just have to pull the candle out, and then I can turn on and off the red lights, and then I can turn on and off the candle. So it really isn't that bad. So you can see here, once I put that battery pack up inside the pumpkin and then I added my pillar candle to the top, I just got started. I wanted to try to hide most of the wire from those lights, so just a little bit of lights shone through. So I'm adding in a bunch of sunflowers, and then I have some little odds and ends from floral picks that I've used in the past, and I just tucked things around until I liked how everything looked. So you can see this craft came together pretty quick and easy. And it's really easy to customize this to whatever style you prefer or whatever colors work best in your home. And if you wanted to, you could form all of the flowers and everything onto a cardboard ring and then slip that onto the charger so that it's a little bit more permanent. But I knew once I placed this on my table, I wouldn't be moving it around. So I wasn't worried that any of those flowers or pieces that I added would slide off. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me again today. If you need even more fall DIY inspiration, check out one of the videos I left on the screen. All right, everyone, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.